I know what I'm going to see. I'm going to see another picture of 12 to 18 walleye he's got. And he don't take them, when you take pictures and you show them, you make them look like they're bigger than what they really are. He keeps them over here because he don't need to make them look bigger. They are big, let me tell you. He does a great job. So Brad, if you come forward and tell us a little bit about how you catch them and what we can do to become better walleye anglers. Let's hear it. Let's hear it.
Can everybody hear me? So this thing works. I think he exaggerates the size of my walleye just a little bit. I do have short arms, so when I hold them out, they don't. Anyway, thank y'all for having me. My name is Brad Skelton. I'm a fishing guide, and I'm not a public speaker. I think I said that last time that I was here. But what I want to talk about is what I call the 4 seasons of walleye. That's what we have here on Greers Ferry. I know nothing about fishing up north. I think Marty and Jim and a lot of the guys in the club, they're from up north, and they tell me all these crazy stories of catching hundreds of walleye in a day. I have not been able to recreate that. So it's a different fishery for sure. The winter months, they can be good or they can be really bad. So Jamie, let's back that up. I'm going to start in November. That's when I think walleye scatter. They get off the fall pattern where they're using humps and they're still using shade, hiding in shade and stuff like that. The water's cooling off, so they'll pull up shallow. Well, the threadfin shad, they're done spawning. They're done with their fall spawn. So the shad get out, they get deep. The walleye, they disperse. They become hard to catch up with. They can swim about 2 miles an hour, just kind of cruising around, and they'll be. I think Jackie, he may have to back me up on this, but we caught fish 100 feet deep. I mean, they get very, very deep. That's when you have your mixed bags. So everything's growing eggs, everything's chasing shad balls and stuff like that. So that's when your walleye numbers are going to go down. Your consistent days, you're not going to have as many consistent days. You're going to have days where you find fish and you catch them. You're going to have days where you spend your entire day looking for fish. And that's kind of, I fish all winter long. I guide, every chance that I can. And I do catch a lot of walleye, but I don't catch them on near consistent basis. And what we use in the wintertime is a hollow jigging wrap. I think that is the only thing that I throw in the winter. And it's because I've got to get a fish that's 80 foot deep. He's moving 2 miles an hour. And I'm chasing him. So I've got to get that bait to intercept that fish and get his attention because it's a pitch black dark. So the heaviest, biggest jigging wrap that you can find, you'll notice in the wintertime, if you're trying to find them local, they're gone. There are none. If you have to order some, I usually have decent luck finding them on Cabela's or Bass Pro, but if you find them anywhere, you best get them. That bait is going to catch your walleye from November into the later part of January and early February. So February, I don't fish the north end of this lake. I spend my time south of the Narrows. So if you see walleye that I catch, you see pictures or something like that, we catch everything south of the Narrows. That's where I spend my time. I live at Heber. I've kind of specialized in fishing the deep clear water. I think a lot of people call it the Dead Sea, and I've had the opportunity to change a lot of folks' minds over the years. It's really a great place. But so after back it up a little bit, the walleye spawn on the north end occurs, right in March. You start seeing people catching them up the forks and stuff like that. It really starts to get going on the south end in the later part of March. So, and they don't really bite very good in that period. Those who went with me, late part of March, I talked about the walleye spawn. It just gets tough. It does. When they're actively spawning, they're not like bass, they're not like crappie. They're more like deer in a sense. So that the male walleye, they're going to chase the females around. They're not worried about eating. She's not either. She's just worried about dropping eggs. So, they're an entirely different fish. So you've got a couple weeks there where it's going to be very, very tough. And then you get into springtime, like right now, like in April. The fish just got off the spawn on the south end. They just got done. So you've got fish that, what I'm catching right now is a lot of males when they get done spawning. They're out moving around, they're feeding pretty heavy, but they're moving. Like I talked about in the wintertime, I'm chasing. And except right now I'm in shallower water, so I'm in 25 to 35 feet of water. I'm chasing moving fish, but the males are starting to group back up, kind of like deer do after the rut. They're starting to group back up. So I'm chasing these groups of 2 to 3 to 5. That's the pattern that I fish right after the spawn. I'm probably not the best at targeting the big females right after the spawn. I'm looking for numbers. So if I can go out and I can catch 14 to 16, 18-inch fish, I am thrilled. And if I can catch 6 fish, I call that a good day. Up until the threadfin shad spawn, and that's, I talked with a few folks this afternoon about that. That's like a holiday for me. That's what I look forward to every day. And late April every year, when the water temperature starts to approach 67 degrees, your shad move shallow, they're going to spawn somewhere between that 68 and 72 degree range. You know, Cody Smith, he knows a lot more about shad cycles and threadfin shad than I do. I just know what I've observed in chasing these walleye. And when they get up there and they start to spawn, you've got a little over a month of the best trolling bite that you'll ever see. And I brought a bait. I've got it sitting over here on my table. It's a flicker shad. Everybody knows about the flicker shad. I've got my color that I like. So everybody is more than welcome to look at that if you can find that in that color. It's a limited edition. They actually, I think they've discontinued it. I just rounded up the last of what I could find, but if you can possibly find that color, it's called Flash Chubby. I can't find the flicker minnow in that color. That is the absolute best. I've got 3 or 4 of them, and I'm a little scared to use them. I don't want to lose them. Save those for hard times, but the shad, it works just as good. The only thing about the flicker shad in the Series 7 is it does not go as deep. But if you pull cranks like I do, with 3 miles an hour, maybe 3.5, I burn them. I power troll. I think that I catch a lot less white bass if I'm moving fast, and I dig the bills of those crankbaits into the bottom of that lake. So with a flicker minnow, I can get that thing 17 feet deep, 3.5 miles an hour, digging into the rocks, digging into the grass, bumping through stuff. And when I run by a walleye, he's got to make a split-second decision: do I eat it or not? And if he decides to eat it, he's getting cooked. Because, it's moving so fast. He's going to hit it, and it's going to hook him and slow the boat down a little bit, reel him in. And sometimes when you slow those down, whatever, you got a fish on, I'll cut the throttle back. Somebody's reeling in the fish, all of a sudden, another pole will go off. If there's a fish that had been following that, he'll hit it. So that's going to last. The trolling bite, I caught fish last year, power trolling on and off. If I get somebody that don't want to troll, they want to fish single pole, we're going to go throw a drop shot with a night crawler or a jigging worm. That's my favorite thing to use, is a fireball jig with a night crawler. So I think that's probably what I use most of the year. I catch fish trolling typically until the first week of June. That's when a lot of folks stop to catch fish trolling, especially up shallow, and they kind of wonder where they've been. All they've done is that water temperature, every year it starts to approach the high 70s at that point. So 78, 79, 80 degrees, kind of depend, varies by the year, but at that point those walleye, they want to go back down. They want to go to that temperature range that they feel comfortable living in, which is 70 degrees, 68, 70 degrees. They love that. And that's what they target throughout the winter, is the warmest water they can find. That's why the shad go deep. That's why they go deep. But after they go deep, there's 2 things you can use to kill a walleye. And that's his food and his eyes. His big eyes, I really believe that sunlight gives a walleye a headache. I really do. And so if I can find them, there's 2 ways they're going to hide those eyes from the sun, and that's going to be depth or shade. And shade may be the shaded edge of a hump or a ridge line, which I love on ridge lines, because you can work in a straight line and just, it's like a factory. It's a lot of fun. But spend a lot of time fishing in the timber, spend a lot of time fishing humps, ridge lines, stuff like that. And hey, you hear a lot of people, they bottom bounce all summer, and they catch fish, and they catch them on flats. They don't like to be in the timber because they lose their tackle. You know, there's fish on flats, and if you're going to target fish on flats, I think the best way to do that is probably going to be the bottom bounce. But if I can catch it casting to it, I will. That's the way I like to do it. Now, throughout the summer, that's all I'm doing. They may vary by depth from, you know, when they first go deep, that 25-foot mark is about where they like to be, and they may get as deep as 40 throughout the summer. And then they start to, you know, really pull back up. Like September is kind of like a second spring. You start to kind of get some cooler nights and some cooler mornings here and there. It starts to cool off a little bit. Those cold fronts late in the summer that you get, they help you. You know, we've got a cold front coming this week, and we're going to have a couple tough days of fishing. You know, if it's a hard front, you know, 20-degree drop. If it's a hard front, as they're saying, it's going to be tough. But you know, if the temperature drops 20 degrees in the summertime when that water's 80, 90 degrees, those fish, I really can't see that they would care. I mean, it really don't. If anything, I think it really makes it better. But when those fish, they pull up and they really get key on humps. So September and October, which is the very tail end of the peak season walleye bite on this lake. But it can be even better than the shad spawn. I mean, last year it was. I mean, we were catching 18, 20, 30 every day. I mean, we needed a half day to fill 3 or 4 limits every day, and that was during September and October. I mean, it was just crazy. And I anticipate that, you know, I'm seeing the same kind of pattern this year that I observed last year. So I anticipate another record year of walleye fishing.
Was that trolling?
Sir?
Was you trolling?
It lately that's bottom bouncing. So I mean, I'm trolling, but I'm moving pretty slow. It's a lot different. You know, when you're power trolling with crankbaits early in the year like this and stuff, that fish hits it. I mean, he hooks himself, pole bends over. You don't know whether a 15-pound hybrid or a big old walleye just hit it because you're moving so quick. I mean, hey, you'll catch some white bass this big. They'll bow. I use 9-foot medium action rods. I mean, they'll bow the rod all the way back to the boat. You know, you don't know what you have, but bottom bouncing, you're moving so slow. Which I think I see a lot of people talking about moving 8/10 and moving 1 mile an hour. I really like 1.2 to even 2 miles an hour, kind of in that range. And I kind of keep that weight in contact with the bottom the entire time. I use a lot of heavy weight. I use a 4-ounce weight most of the time when I'm doing it. But that's kind of, I mean, that's all. They go from real deep to. And the spawn is when I don't do the best. They come up shallow, they get crazy, they go back down deep, and that summer pattern walleye fishing, I mean, it's some of the most fun that you'll ever have. It's amazing. And then, you know, getting into the fall bite, it's all good. I mean, it is good from now until the end of October. After that, it just kind of gets tough. But that's kind of, I wanted to keep this kind of short and sweet. That's where I'm going to end my little speech, and I'll start taking questions if anybody has any.
Hold on, before you ask your question, we need to get a mic so we can get it on the video.
What was that jig you said?
That's a Northland Fireball jig. Yeah, it glows in the dark. I think it's multiple levels. Oh. Yes, sir.
And so will you describe the bite a little bit? So you talk about in the spring, you're trolling 3-4 mile an hour.
Yes.
So you get a bite. But what if you're trolling a little later? What's the bite like? And how
So
do you set the hook?
it depends on what you're trolling. So if you're talking about pulling 1 mile an hour, you're talking about pulling a lot of bouncers, you're talking about pulling crankbaits, it's all different.
Crankbaits.
Crankbaits. So I mean, really trolling with a crankbait, I don't ever see a reason to set the hook. I think, you know, I instruct people, I tell people to just reel them in with a crankbait. I think, you know, I've had a lot of people with pole bend over and they'll grab it and they'll bend down like they're going to set the hook on a tuna and get in some kind of stance. And then they either break my line or they pull the hook out, you know. A crankbait, I think, it don't matter how fast you're going, if you get bit, he's either gonna hook himself or you're gonna miss him. And then at that point, I just like to reel him in and try and get him to the net as quick as I can.
Okay, Brad, would you explain your bottom bouncer, how you got it rigged, and what kind of weight you use, and how far, you know, how's that rigging set up?
I do build my own spinner rigs, and it's just more cost effective, and I can't seem to find one on the market that's built out of heavy enough line and light enough hooks that I can pull them in the timber. If I have to pull bottom bouncers through the timber, I will. It just kind of depends on where the fish are, and that's what I've already got rigged up, and I've been hitting them on humps for 3 days, and I find some in the timber, we're going to try and catch them. So I build them on 20-pound fluorocarbon. I use number 4, and I use a lot of single hooked rigs, and that I'll use a 1/0 hook on a single hooked rig with a half a crawler. That seems to be best for getting finicky fish to bite. I think it's a smaller profile. As far as double hooked rigs, I use a number 6 on top and number 4 on the bottom. I like floats. I put a lot of floats on. I usually will double my floats up. I like small blades, and I like orange. I like chartreuse. And I really like purple with red beads. That's one of my best colors. But I run them about 3 foot from a 4-inch bottom bouncer weight. That's. Yes, sir.
You troll your big boat?
When I'm pulling crankbaits during the shad spawn, yes, sir, I do. Sometimes I have to throttle it up too. Yeah, so when I put my boat in gear, I'm moving about 2.5 miles an hour. I really like to be, starting out, I keep kind of moving up and trolling until I feel, if I pull up, say, and I catch 3 fish trolling, I don't consider that to be, prime time, and I'll go slower depending on the water temperature, but when that water temperature hits high 60s, I'm moving 3 to 3.5 miles an hour.
When you're power trolling that fast, I'm assuming you're not for the timber that you're looking.
It's funny you say that because I will do it in timber. And it can't, one rod per side of the boat. Okay, when I thought I was crazy the first time I ever did timber. I was having a very tough day. I had 2 walleye by noon, I had a full day. And I knew the fish were in the timber. This was on the tail end of the trolling bite. And this is what these folks wanted to do. I pulled into timber, and I must have got hung up 10 times that day, but I ended up filling nobody's limit. I got to take some home too. Sometimes you have to do that. I'll usually run a spread of 3 to 4 rods if I'm not in the timber, but one person gets 1 rod, and that's all we pull through the timber. But yes, I will do the timber if I have to. It's kind of inconvenient, but.
How far do you cast out when you're trolling like that? You're baiting high.
I like to start around 140 to 150. Depends on if they're real shallow. There'll be a point where those fish are in 10 feet of water. My boat's going to push fish, the bow of the boat, the shadow of the boat, the noise of the engine. At that point, 200 may be better suited. I like to get them way back. They get real deep. They dig the bottom really hard. And I'm still putting pressure on those fish, and they know I'm there. But I feel like by the time my boat's 150 to 200 feet away from them, maybe I'm not spooking them as bad. Is kind of what I feel like.
What about the bottom bouncer?
I put them out however far I have to put them out just to make sure they're ticking bottom. If they can be just right under the boat, at that point they're deeper. They're not quite as spooky. At that point, I mean, sometimes they'll be 40, 50 foot behind the boat, depending on how quick I'm going, how deep I'm going. If I'm in 35 foot of water and I'm moving 2 miles an hour, even with a 4-ounce weight, sometimes they're dragging behind the boat pretty good.
First of all, I don't know anything about it, so I'm learning a lot. But what about your losing? Do you lose a lot of your riggings on that bottom bouncing, or you use those?
I don't.
So they'll straighten out.
I build them out of a live wire hook, even the 1/0 hooks. They're nothing fancy. They're cheap. I think last year I got them off Amazon. I mean, just cheap. When the hooks, when they get to where they just been out so much they break, I just rebuild them the best I can. But no, I use a very light wire hook, so I can get that rig is gonna get hung up at a lot throughout the day. And if I can keep from having to retie stuff, I will.
I had two questions. What kind of live wire hooks are you using? And what's your electronic setup look like?
So as far as electronic setup, I run Humminbird at my console. I've got dual Humminbirds there. I think, Humminbird has excellent side and down imaging. They've got the mega imaging, they use megahertz. I can see everything just so much clearer. I used to have entirely Garmin on my boat. It just was rigged completely Garmin. And I went to the Humminbirds. Their mapping is not as good as Garmin. Garmin is superior in their mapping and their forward-facing sonar. But up front, I've got another Humminbird, and I've got it paired with a 12-inch Garmin. And I don't like the touch screen. I like the dial. So I've got 1242. It's got it works really good for me. And the Humminbird that I've got up there came with the boat.
So you're not live scoping that?
Oh, yeah, sometimes. That forward-facing sonar is very, 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 very good tool. Not all the time, but when I need it, yes, I will turn it on. And summer pattern fish, like right now, I can say I got a trip tomorrow. We're going to use live scope. These fish are still deep, but until they work up and commit to shallow water, no, I'm going to use that thing. They're in timber. I got to chase them and all throughout the summer. But the Humminbird that I've got up front, I just use it for mapping, for running tracks, what I talked about earlier, running ridge lines and stuff like that. If I work a ridge that's 300 yards long, and I caught a bunch of fish, and I need a couple more for limits, I want to turn around and go to the exact same spot, well, it keeps my tracks, it keeps my line, so I can just turn the boat around and run that same track. And it'll be, whatever shaded edge of that ridge, that's where I want to run. So that's what I use that for. But as far as hooks, number 4, and number 6, and on my single hook rigs, I use a 1-aught. Line. So as far as bottom bouncing goes, to the weight, I always use just 50-pound braided main line. Oh, no. 12-pound monofilament, the cheapest stuff. I just use Berkeley Big Game. Just buy it in the bulk because I got to re-spool every 2 or 3 days because they get so twisted up. There's nothing, just cheap monofilament. Yes, sir. Yeah.
Brad, I got a question for you here. Take the average novice walleye person, okay, that's new to walleye fishing. They don't know where to go. They want to catch a couple walleye. They want to eat a couple walleye. Why don't you share with them what they should do and how they should go about doing that?
Okay, so like I was talking about the shad spawn that's coming. As far as somebody that is not an experienced walleye fisherman, it's going to be difficult to catch numbers of walleye right now up until the water warms up. Now it happens quicker up here on the north end than it does mine. My bite kicks off probably a couple weeks after y'all's does, but the easiest way to do this, especially this time of year, is capitalize on shad spawn and power trolling. You don't need a live scope. All you need to be able to do is find thread fin shad in 10 to 15 feet of water and pull crankbaits. And shad, they like to spawn in vegetation, stuff like that. So I mean, if you know a spot that's 10 to 15 foot deep and they've got a lot of timber in it, and it's got a lot of grass or a lot of buck brush in the water or something like that, that's where you'll find walleye. And when that water temp gets up in the high 60s. Right now, the pattern that I'm on is I'm chasing fish that are working their way out of feeder creeks, their males. It's kind of hard to do without forward-facing sonar, but if you can find them, they're kind of hard to they're kind of hard to see. They love that bottom. They want to be hard into it every once in a while. You'll see them come up out of the mud. You go, oh, there's 5 walleye there. I didn't know that. And you just kind of have to chase them around and try and keep a jigging worm in front of them best you can. That's the pattern I'm fishing on.
So do you ever find yourself just sitting still and jigging off the bottom?
Oh, yes, sir. Oh, yeah. No, I'm not much of a troller, really. If I can sit in one spot and cast and catch walleye, that's the way that I would prefer to do it. I'm not a purist to any method. I'm going to do whatever is the most effective to catch the most numbers of walleye. But yeah, there's several times, I mean, you know, throughout the summer pattern, like right now, if the fish would stay put, I could do that, but it just won't. But throughout the summertime, yeah, we're just sitting there. A lot of times, sometimes I'm just put the trolling motor on spot lock and we don't even use the live scope, just kind of kick it to the side and just drop straight onto the boat and catch them. I mean, if they're schooling up under the boat. And definitely throughout the wintertime, in December, you'll notice this the most when they'll chase shad balls, they'll get all fed up, and then in the afternoon, they'll go lay in the bottom, they'll kind of group up a little bit. They're deep, I mean, they're 90-something, 100-foot deep. You can just sit right over the top of them and just jig them. You can sit there all day long.
What does a typical school of walleye look like to you when you find them? Are they 20, 30, 40, 2 to 300?
I like to find schools of 50 fish or more. That's what really makes me excited. Like right now, I can tell you that's a summertime deal. But no, if I can find, 50 fish or more, that's great. Now right now, if you're finding these small groups of 3 to 5, then you're doing pretty good right now. They're just now kind of starting to school back up. Now in the fall, that's when, September and October, you're going to find 100 fish sitting on one hump. And I mean, it's pretty cool. No, I've seen some schools that are pretty crazy. But I really get excited when I see a ton of fish. When that school of walleye sits up off the bottom that far and it spans, 75 feet, that's when I'm happy.
Hey, folks, no other questions?
Ask him how deep the humps are.
How deep are the humps you fishing?
It really varies by lake level. Usually that time of year we're pretty low. Last year we were very low. That kind of targeting that 28, 35 foot range when you're talking about fishing the humps, late summer and early fall. Just out of you're looking just out of the sunlight area, right around the thermal.
How deep's the water around the hump?
How deep is the water below the hump?
I'm not sure I understand your question.
You got the hump that's up, and he's asking how deep are the humps?
Oh, I mean,
How tall are the humps?
oh, they come up. I mean, there's a few of them that I fish that come up to 10 feet. But, I'm not ever on the top of them. There's too much sunlight penetration. There's some of them that I'm fishing the very tip top of it. There's one tree stuck up in the middle of it that's got some fish around it, and it's 35 foot deep. It just they all vary. And at that point, you just got to study your maps really well, run around, mark all the humps you can, scan fish, and try and locate and identify walleye. But that can be some of the most fun walleye fishing you have all year. Because they're deep and they're not spooky. So when you find them, you usually just sit there and catch them.
When you're digging over the top of them, and spot locked in, how do you grade that out?
So, if I'm jigging over, whether I'm jigging over the top of them, or, now, talking about summer pattern here, whether I'm jigging over the top of them, or I'm casting to them, that fireball jig that I was talking about with a night crawler on it, I use a whole night crawler. I mean, I don't care if it's 10 inches long, they want that big bite. And just a 1/4 ounce head, I'll adjust my sizes. I mean, when they're real deep and they're in the timber in the summertime, and when I hook a fish out of a group in the summertime, small groups, if I'm not finding big schools, a lot of times when I hook a fish, they'll move. So I want a heavy head, so at that point, I mean, we're running 3/8, ½ ounce. It just kind of varies by situation, but with a walleye, I want to get down to him as quick as I possibly can, and it's been my experience that he will not eat it unless you're on the bottom. I think they feel a lot safer eating it off the bottom.
You said that you was driving around until you identified the walleye. How do you identify a walleye versus a bass or whatever?
So different sonars cast different shadows. Like side scan and down imaging, I can tell you really just can't 100%, at least with my units. There may be somebody out there that's up there, I can't unless I already know they're there, I can't drive over. So, now, unless I see schools of walleye look like schools of walleye. They're hard into the bottom, and I don't know a bunch of long fish that school up together other than walleye that land on it. But unless you're finding schools, it can be really hard to identify if you're looking at a walleye. I don't have a remedy for that. Just because the shadows. Now, depends on how fast you're moving too. If you get a really clear image, and, you know, the fish is sideways, and you're like, well, that thing's long. Now, force-facing sonar, like live scope, they got a very big tail. They got a big kicking tail, and they look like they got a humpback, and they're always staring at the bottom, it seems. Is kind of what they look like. And, I mean, on forward-facing sonar, you can just tell how long they are. They've got, when you present a bait or a lure to them, and you see that big tail really get moving, when it's going to check it out, that's when you're like, yeah, that's a walleye. They got a big tail.
So let's go back to Paul's discussion. Tell us what you think about the white bass, how we are to attack
I
it.
think it's a great idea. So every opportunity that I get to kill a white bass, I do. They're a big pain in my butt. They cost me a lot of money every year. They tear up my gear, they tear up my lures, and they compete with walleye for, the same food source. And where it seems like wherever walleye are, most of the year white bass are too. I think it's a fantastic idea, and I don't really have the time to organize the whole deal, but I will definitely make sure that I can show up and participate in it somehow. These questions are free. You don't have to pay me and get the vote to find out the answers, so you might as well.
Bradley, you ever use hair jigs?
Sir?
You ever use hair jigs?
I do not use hair jigs for walleye, and I just haven't ever tried. I see a lot of stuff on social media, people catching them on hair jigs up north. I just haven't tried it. A hair jig really is a cold water presentation. It doesn't matter the species really that you're trying to catch, just like an Alabama rig or a jerk bait. That's something I didn't touch on that I need to. A jig and wrap, cold water presentation, it just gets down so much quicker. I mean, a 2-ounce hair jig would look really funny. So that's why I just don't mess with them. But as far as wintertime fishing, whenever they are starting to come up in February, they like a big mouthful. They like it moving slow. A big jerk bait like a mega bass has the Vision 110, 110 plus 2. That thing's like that long, man. It's noisy. It spins perfect, and if you pop it just right, it will flip around and look at the fish, and it don't matter what kind of fish it is, they can stand it. But the Alabama rig is one of my favorite February tactics for bigger walleye.
Do you use, Brad, do you use any crankbaits besides flicker shad? Can you recommend a few others?
Flicker shad and flicker minnow. A lot of people use the bandits, the deep walleye ones. My crankbait bite, I've never had to throw anything other than the flicker shad and the flicker minnow, whether it be the size 7, the size 9, the size 5. They're just going up and down in sizes. I've never really had to try anything else. I've caught a few walleye on bandits, but I really think that flicker shad, just the way it works and the way it wobbles so quick, and they troll so well. I mean, they can bounce off of stuff and not pull up to the surface. The only reason that bait will pull up to the surface is if you feel the bill up the grass. I think it's probably the best crankbait to pull behind the boat.
What's the water temperature down south? Today it's 67 up there.
Well, I didn't fish today. Unfortunately, I was at the tax office messing around. I was up on the north end Sunday crappie fishing. We did really well, and it was in the middle 60s. When I left the south end Saturday, it was 60 to 61. 59 in the backs of creeks is what it was. I need the water to warm up. Whenever the south end gets to the high 60s, it's going to be really good.
You're talking surface without giving away the trade secrets or the farm or your GPS coordinates. Could you recommend some general areas to fish for folks to go to? Just general areas.
Coming out of winter, in springtime like this, when water temperature really does play a big deal. I spend my winters on the north banks, especially your feeder creeks and stuff like that on the north banks, and that's what I'm targeting right now. I will say when the shad spawn gets going, your bay areas, Cove Creek area is good. Salt Creek is fantastic if you don't mind the trees. All those kind of shallow bay areas that grow vegetation, and anywhere, around islands where you've got these big long sloping points and stuff that take forever to drop off, those grow vegetation. Anywhere there's sunlight penetration for a pretty good distance is kind of where you're looking at, because those shad are going to want that grass. Up here, Hicken Bay, and I think around Sugarloaf Mountain, and believe it or not, even up around Choctaw, outside of the mouth of the bay there, that's a pretty popular spot.
I happened to talk to a couple of guys that were fishing, and this was last year sometime, and they were digging bay, and they were fishing, they were just bouncing off the bottom with a spoon. It was fishing.
So I get that question a lot. I really don't like spoons. And they catch fish too. They catch fish. I don't like spoons because when I'm using that, the hook pops up, grabs the line all the time. Like I can't jig it too much, but when I use braided line when I'm jigging deep, they can't see it. It will make such a big mess, and especially like in the wintertime, if I'm going to drop 100 feet and then immediately have to reel that spoon back up to fix it, it's just aggravating. That's why I don't like spoons, just because they're bad about the hook flipping up and grabbing the line.
All right, let's hear it from Brad.